Welcome to Sync Up, a show about OneDrive, the intelligent files app for Microsoft 365. We are your hosts, Ankita Kirti and Jason Moore. I am Ankita Kirti, Product Manager on the OneDrive team.
And I'm Jason Moore, Group Program Manager for OneDrive. This show will take you behind the scenes of OneDrive, shedding light on how OneDrive connects you to all of your files in Microsoft 365 so you can share and work together from anywhere while protecting your work from accidental loss and malicious attacks.
In each episode, we'll cover important subjects and information about Microsoft OneDrive, including a dedicated topic, guest interviews, news and announcements, and a special significant topic outside of the technology norm.
Today, our guests are Allan Bourne and Matt Wolodarsky. Allan is a Director of Customer Success, and Matt is a Senior Program Manager in the OneDrive and SharePoint Customer Engineering team. Today, our guests are Allan Bourne, a CSM, or Customer Success Manager based out of San Francisco. Allan spends his time helping Microsoft Enterprise customers successfully adopt all of our Office 365 collaboration tools. We also have Matt Wolodarsky. Matt is a Senior Program Manager in the OneDrive and SharePoint Customer Engineering team at Microsoft. And Matt's actually joining us remotely today from Toronto. Matt focuses on helping customers adopt and get full value from their investments in OneDrive and SharePoint.
Really excited to have you guys on the call today, Matt and Allan. Thanks so much for joining in.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is my first official podcast, so very excited to be here.
Yeah, it's actually my first podcast as well. Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Awesome. So before we begin our topic today, I'm flying to India for the holidays. What are your plans?
You're not just flying to India for the holidays. A special mention, I think we should call it, is you're flying to India for your wedding!
Are you kidding?
Yes, that's awesome. I'm super excited. For me, I am spending time with my parents and my kids and our dog and our cat and all of those good things before I head off to Oslo for work.
Awesome. What about you, Matt? Allan?
Yeah, I'm going to be flying as well. I'm going to be actually going to Portland. My sister-in-law is expecting in December, so my family and I are going to go there and welcome my new nephew and my kid's new cousin.
Oh, congratulations.
So cute.
Thank you. Cool. Yeah. And I'm already in Boise, Idaho, actually visiting family this week. And it's funny you should mention that, Matt, because 2 years ago, we were doing the same thing here, welcoming my nephew to the world. So it's his birthday this week, his second birthday.
Oh, I love this episode already. This is so exciting. Okay, well then, one more question, just kind of in the holiday spirit of things. I was curious for everyone's kind of favorite holiday treat. Like, what is the thing they look most forward to or most excited about? And Keita, do you want to go first?
I like the plum cake, like I was telling you.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about the Western treats,
Yeah.
Indian treats, there is a sweet dish known as gulab jamun.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to try, if anyone has a sweet tooth, they'll really, really like it.
I love that.
What about you, Allan?
I love roast dinner, so it's all about the roast dinner for me. It's a turkey, and I bring over all the things that my mum used to cook during the holidays. Roast potatoes, Brussels sprouts, mashed swede, cabbage. I love it.
Oh, so good. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, so the first thing that popped into my head is something called Hanukkah gelt. So I celebrate Hanukkah, and Hanukkah gelt basically are these coins that have the gold wrapper, but when you open them up, it's chocolate.
Nice.
So you can't use it as currency, but you can enjoy some delicious chocolate.
It feels like chocolate is better in all those cases anyway. That's great. For me, I'd say, and this will seem very plain, but my very, very truly honest favorite is pumpkin pie.
Oh, I love pumpkin pie. I just love it.
It's... that's one of the things for me. It doesn't matter.
I completely forgot about it. Yes.
Now you remember pumpkin pie.
That's my answer.
Yeah. We're going to need to go eat after this.
I'm surprised no one mentioned pumpkin spice latte, actually.
That's well, we usually do that earlier in the fall on these episodes. So next year we'll get to that one. All right. I think we're ready for diving into our big topics today.
So today's topic is around the importance of change management and user adoption. This was actually one of my biggest takeaways at Ignite this year. as to how important change management and product adoption is. And user adoption is aligned to the overall success of any application. Ideally, to feel that you have maximized your investment in Microsoft 365 and OneDrive, you need to maximize user engagement with them. Jason, did you have any conversations around user adoption or change management with the customers at Ignite?
Absolutely. I'd say the vast majority of them of that form. Yeah. I don't think we're really in the era where people are kind of going, is the cloud thing going to happen, or is it really a CB radio kind of situation? It's a thing people kind of accept now as a real tool in the toolkit that everyone is going to be able to leverage. And the conversation now is, how do I get the most out of it? How do I make sure that the value comes out of that and then I make the right decisions? Because there's still some stuff that can seem pretty scary about it. Hey, I'm trusting this new notion of putting things into these data centers in the cloud, and in terms of people kind of getting to take advantage of the features and capabilities that come out of it. It wasn't so long ago that the best we had was a file share somewhere, and we didn't have context like who's editing a document right now and what's going on with it and how do I do governance in those ways. And now those things really are part of the fabric of conversation.
Yeah. Matt, according to you, why do you think adoption is important? Like, if we have to explain this to someone who's just implemented OneDrive.
Yeah, I would say if we step back and think about it broadly, change that is, and just ask ourselves, how do we deal with being asked to change something? And I think a lot of us will resist change. And in fact, that's human nature. We don't like, as human beings, to change our behavior or change how we do things. And so not surprisingly, it's no different with technology. In fact, the CIO Executive Board, which did a survey of enterprise end users, found that only 34% of end users are willing to use a new system that's been rolled out by their organization. So you can see there's quite a bit of an uphill climb to close that gap. This isn't OneDrive specific. This is a reality with enterprise technology. And when it comes to deploying new technology, we just can't ignore the people side of the change.
Yeah, that's true. And when the IT administrator at an organization starts deploying OneDrive, when should they exactly start to think about adoption? Like, I've met folks who think about adoption like after the migration or deployment has been done. And we've seen, Matt, you and I, when we've worked with customers, that's not really a successful way to go. What would you suggest for our listeners?
Yeah, to put it bluntly, immediately, and even before they start planning their deployment or when they're planning their deployment. This should be really part of the project kickoff when organizations start to think about rolling out OneDrive or any other technology for that matter. And it should be a dedicated work stream, just like you might have one for deployment. There should be a dedicated work stream for adoption that actually has people assigned to it who are executing a bunch of adoption-related activities. And the reason for this is there's planning that is necessary when it comes to doing a successful end-user adoption campaign. There's adoption materials that need to be built, and Microsoft provides a number of templates to help customers get started. In addition to that, we would recommend customers do a pilot, not just of OneDrive, but of the campaign itself, so that before you go live and go big, you can get feedback and iterate your campaign to get it more on point. And all of this takes time. And of course, you want to be ready as you start the drumbeat leading up to launch, at launch and post-launch, as you're doing your adoption communications and training kind of throughout that period.
I think that's a great point. I mean, especially that notion of you're going to try out what lands. Certainly, every organization has their reasons that they're doing one of these deployments. Yeah. And hopefully a whole set of those are for the great reasons and great value that their end users are going to get out of it. But figuring out what are the things that land or don't, what are the things in a particular job or situation that are really valuable to those people, that'll be kind of the hook for them to get on board. That all seems to be something you can learn and continue to get better at if you're able to follow a process like that from the very beginning.
For this one, Allan, is there anything that you would want to add?
Yeah, the point I would make that I think it's really important to acknowledge that this is a new muscle for IT organizations. Historically, IT teams are very used to rolling out technology and technology solutions and turning things on. And now we're moving to this world of SaaS and cloud. A lot of IT organizations are realizing that it isn't enough just to turn the technology on, and there has to actually be an adoption framework around it. And that's a new muscle and a new skill that a lot of teams have to learn. And so, if you're an IT leader and you're thinking about this, then to Matt's point, I think definitely making sure you have some dedicated resources to this, like charter someone with being responsible for adoption. Charter a different team for turning it on, making sure it works, making sure the quality's there, all the technical bits, but make it someone's job to get it successfully adopted. And as much as possible, dedicate them to that project. It's extremely important.
That is so true. And even internally in Microsoft, we have a new arm, which is the Customer Success Managers, right? Which was, I think, launched a year or a little more than that. So even Microsoft acknowledges the fact how important adoption and usage is, and that there needs to be dedicated resources that deal with this part of the customer journey. That's a very valid point.
Yeah, that's right. And that's what we do day in, day out is work, generally partner with IT organizations and teach them how to do this.
Right. Of course, yeah, it's a new skill that we're all kind of learning and doing, and that is true whether you're an organization that's implementing something or you're a provider, a vendor of something. That kind of reminds me of kind of the next question that I had on this, which is really around, often when people are deploying or doing something like this, they're doing it in a situation where maybe they had another solution deployed. Maybe they had one of those quote unquote shadow IT situations where everyone kind of had figured out their own thing. Maybe they're using a bunch of consumer tools to try to solve their business needs. How do you approach that? Like, how does that get influenced? How does that influence taking on these challenges around change management and adoption? And what is different or unique about those situations?
Yeah, so with these scenarios, when you're moving an end user from a competitor product or from a consumer tool, this is where end user change management is especially important, because at the end of the day, you're moving their cheese. You're asking them to change their behavior. So it's really just about applying those change management fundamentals to this specific problem. So for example, getting the right executive sponsorship to represent this change. They've got the credibility and the reach to accomplish that. You'll want them to be doing the awareness and excitement, getting people on board with the change, explaining why it's important for the organization, and namely with OneDrive, one of the key benefits would be protecting company information. But more importantly than that, they actually have to articulate to employees what's in it for them. This is where you're going to bang up against that end user resistance that we spoke about earlier, and putting it in context of how the new tool is going to help end users do their job more effectively, makes it more relevant, and really helps get that buy-in.
What are good examples of that? Like what have you found in the past has really worked well?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the organization and the profile of their end users and the sort of work that they've done. So for example, I've seen in some cases where being able to find content easily is a big concern. It oftentimes can be a big challenge. So with the Discover feature in OneDrive, it can help end users discover relevant files that they didn't know had existed. And all of this is powered by the Microsoft Graph.
Right.
Another example, just to provide a contrast to that, is I remember working with one customer that had this really organizational bad memory. So it was a collective bad memory of a malicious attack that caused a lot of people to lose their files. And so in that case, maybe referencing File Restore, the OneDrive self-service recovery solution for end users to be able to restore files from any point in time during the last 30 days can touch to something that in the past caused a lot of pain, and here we are now offering up a solution. So that's kind of organizational or organizationally relevant, and it's just understanding those drivers, what end users need to accomplish their world, will help you identify what are the right benefits to highlight.
Yeah, I think in an example where you're coming from another solution which has some similar but maybe different capabilities, then obviously trying to pinpoint the differentiating capabilities is going to be really important. So, for example, in the Office 365 suite, one of the big differentiators is this ability that is connected to the entire platform, right? So if there's an organization, you've made a bet on Office 365, then talking about OneDrive in the context of everything else that you get with Office 365, including the security and the compliance capabilities, can be a way to say, we're moving it here. Here's why we're moving it. Here are the reasons why it's good and beneficial for our company. And by the way, here are the features which are going to be really helpful for you as an individual.
And I think in terms of training end users on those differences of how they used to do it and how we're asking them to do it, Microsoft has invested in some end user training content that's publicly available that can really help for situations where customers are moving from specific competitors to OneDrive. So check that out to help with your overall training efforts on those differences.
So for those training on the differences, we have a couple of switch to guides from various cloud storage vendors that can help end users understand how to navigate through the new features of OneDrive and understand the differences with respect to their previous platforms. Matt, apart from this, you and I have worked on various initiatives to drive customer adoption, and one of them was building the entire adoption resource, which is in tech community. I would like you to share more about those resources, and also if there is any other initiative that Microsoft is taking to empower our customers to drive adoption efficiently.
Yeah, that's great. It's actually taken me back about a year and a half ago, Ankita, when we were working on those OneDrive adoption resources. So it's basically a one-stop shop where you can go to get everything that you need to run a successful OneDrive end-user adoption campaign, from an overall adoption playbook that's going to give you the guidance to run the campaign and pointers to important resources to execute. We've got a project plan template. We've got resources to help you build a champions program, OneDrive scenario guides, all sorts of templates for pre-launch, launch, and post-launch communications. So lots of good stuff. Check it out at aka.ms/OneDrive adoption. So those are our adoption resources. The other exciting new solution that I think can really help, not only with OneDrive adoption, but adoption of all our apps and services, is something called Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways. So what this is a new solution from Microsoft that we're making available to our customers, and it provides an on-demand Microsoft 365 end-user training. So it's something that you can actually install in your own tenant environment, customize it, and make sure that all the training content remains up to date. And those are updates that Microsoft is going to make as we're pulling this content from our own repository. So really important to highlight that this is a free solution, and we've got all sorts of great OneDrive end-user training content in Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways. In fact, we just recently added a bunch of new OneDrive playlists. So I would really encourage customers to check out that training solution as part of their overall adoption efforts. And they can learn more by going to aka.ms/M365LP for Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways.
That's awesome. And just for folks listening who maybe, like me, are a little slow on catching all the URLs, all of these are available in the show notes. So if you want to look them up later, not a problem. You'll find them right there, really easy to use.
And I definitely want to echo Matt's comments there about that Learning Pathways tool. It's absolutely fantastic, and all of my customers are using it. It really solves a key issue for organizations of how to do training and how to keep training fresh and up to date, and do it without additional sign-in required. There's no licenses required. You just install it and go. So it's a really great solution. Definitely advise everyone take a look at that.
That's awesome. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about kind of end user features and the pitch for them and how you drive kind of awareness and adoption and success in those. But what about from the admin side? Let's talk a little bit about that. Are there things that you'd highlight as just absolutely critical from an admin perspective in driving usage and engagement with these?
Yeah, definitely. The one thing that comes to mind immediately is the feature in OneDrive called Known Folder Move, or KFM. And I know that you're all familiar with it, but what this feature is it helps move your documents, desktop, and pictures folders that are typically stored locally on somebody's machine, and get these stored up in OneDrive so that you're able to access your stuff from anywhere while protecting all of your content. And the reason that I bring this up is it can actually really help with adoption. If you think about it, with this feature, user content can automatically be synced to OneDrive with no disruption to the end user's productivity. And if you deploy as an IT admin this new feature through a group policy, then the end user actually doesn't even have to take any action. So your users can continue using the folders that they're familiar with, the way they're used to working. They don't have to change their work habits to be able to now save files to OneDrive. It's just tapping into that existing behavior.
I love that. I love the notion that you can add all of this value without being like, everyone's got to go to a 16-hour training program to recognize and realize it. I think that's just awesome.
Yeah, and there's actually a bonus for IT in all of this. It's not just about enabling end-user adoption, but if you think about it, all this content without KFM would likely be living on the end user's machine. So it's practically invisible to IT. And by getting it in the cloud in this way, you can bring it into the fold, get it into the cloud, protect it, classify the content, and make sure that proper security and compliance is in place in that ingested content.
That's a great point, Matt, about known folder move. But I would also like to point out two other features that I feel are very helpful for admins. While they are implementing OneDrive, they should for sure turn these features on by their respective GPOs. One is the silent signing in, the silent sync configuration, which helps you to silently sign in users to OneDrive with their Windows or Office credentials. This will not require your end users to enter their credentials, and in a way, higher percentage of users are signed in. The second thing is files on demand. It helps you to have access to all your files in OneDrive and in your shared libraries without having to download all of them. And why is it important? It's because, firstly, sync is faster, you save disk space, there is lower network utilization, and with Storage Sense now, there is automatic cleanup of files which are not being used. So again, your disk space is being saved. So apart from KFM, which is a great feature, these two features can also prove to be very beneficial for all you IT pros.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that you mentioned there, Ankita. Especially with the silent sign-in, all too often, I might be speaking to an IT organization, they're talking about how they're struggling with adoption, and you go, okay, what's the actual end user experience? What does it look like? Oh, they've got to sign into this dialog box here, and they've got to click here, and they've got to do this, and this. And I said, well, if you make it really hard for them, then of course it's going to be difficult to adopt. So there's a lot that from an IT standpoint we can do to make this a really frictionless experience, and that's one of the keys to unlocking sort of viral adoption, is to make it really easy for the user.
I love all of these features because they're all great ways for people to take the shortest path to getting the value out of an organization's investment with OneDrive. So I think that's fantastic. But if I'm thinking about, again, from this admin perspective, like what are the metrics, what are the KPIs that you really look at when you're doing an adoption initiative and driving that to success? What pops there?
Yeah, that's a really important consideration. We all want to be able to show the impact of our work when rolling out a new technology. So there's a number of different metrics that we've seen our customers use to measure this impact and report on it. Increased adoption is one of the most common metrics, obviously, and you can look through the admin usage reports that are available for OneDrive and other services in Office 365 to report on the usage rates. That's a really good indicator if people are using the service, that they're getting value out of it. But you'll want to move beyond that and look at other benefit areas like improved collaboration. That's obviously a key benefit of OneDrive. So the way that you would measure that is look at and report on the number of users who have files that they're sharing with their colleagues. Improved data protection can be another measurement area. As you get more information and content in OneDrive, then you're better able to protect and secure that data. And one indicator to help you understand if you're widening the content that you're protecting by getting it into OneDrive is looking at the growth of the data that's being stored in your OneDrive tenant. And there's a number of different reporting tools to help with this in product in the admin center. There's a couple of different OneDrive usage-related ports that share information about files shared, storage information, and user activity. In addition to that, there's also something called Microsoft 365 Usage Analytics, which is this free Power BI content pack that you can use to better visualize your OneDrive usage information to be able to gain new insights. It comes with a bunch of pre-built dashboards. What I really like about it is how you can append your Active Directory information so that you can start to slice and dice this OneDrive usage data to look at what the usage rates are for different regions or different departments or different roles, and that can help you.
No, I love all of that stuff, and I love that you've broken into that one, because I think, one of the great powers across Office 365 is how you can mix and match across all these different pieces. And if folks listening haven't done it, going and spending a little bit of time in Power BI and pulling data together to look at it in different ways really kind of elevates some of the things that we do from kind of IT management to really business productivity and business understanding. And I highly recommend that. It's a great use of the tool set there.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we said earlier on about this new muscle that IT needs to build around adoption, and having good KPIs is a really important part of that. And so, when you're doing adoption, immediately the question is, how do we know when we've been successful, right? What does success look like? And so, getting your hands dirty with some of these numbers and understanding sort of baselining your usage before the program starts, and then being able to show your gain, is how you as an IT organization are able to represent back to the business, what you've successfully been able to drive. Here's the evidence of what we've done, and here's why, this adoption program was successful. So super important.
And also internally, Jason, whenever we have our internal review meetings and stuff, when we talk about usage, we don't just look at the number of uploads or if people have access, that's the usage, right? We always look at driving healthy usage. And even within our team, for us, healthy usage is how much internal-external collaboration was done, how much Office usage was done, the mobile use case scenarios, like are people annotating, are people capturing? So even we as the team look at a broad set of aspects to make sure that we are on track with good usage across organizations.
Absolutely. And I think, there's kind of two parts to that. One is our interest is how are we providing that value and making sure people are getting the most out of it. And what Allan was talking about there, I think directly connects in on how people can talk about how they're delivering that value through the adoption of OneDrive and be able to prove out, hey, we made this investment in the cloud and here's how for our organization it's showing great returns on that. So I think those things really fit part and parcel together.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And talking about the value side of things, I've seen a lot of organizations marry this data with qualitative survey results, that they actually go out to their users and ask them, how are you doing with this? How are you doing with that? A lot of organizations will have a regular survey, employee survey, where, collaboration tools is actually one of the questions. And so they look to move that KPI as part of their adoption program. And so marrying it with actual feedback and sentiment can really complete the picture for you.
Yeah. So, Allan, in your experience with working with big organizations, what are some of the best practices and learnings that you can share regarding driving OneDrive adoption?
We mentioned one of them right at the top of the call. Matt mentioned it, which is the most important thing you can do is make change management a part of the program right from the outset. I don't want to belabor that point, but it is incredibly important that you have someone whose responsibility it is to drive adoption, and you're clear on what successful adoption would look like. So having that role defined and having someone that's given the resource and responsibility of doing that is super important. On a related note, at Microsoft, when we engage as CSMs with our customers, we actually use a framework, and that framework is called ADKAR, ADKAR. And you can look it up online and understand what the pillars do. But when you think about creating your framework, creating your adoption program, think about having some items in each of the components of ADKAR, right? So the first one in ADKAR is awareness. So making sure your employees know about the change is happening. Figure out how you're going to create the desire, how you're actually going to convince users to adopt this new way of working or make the change that you're asking them to change. What are these desire-oriented motions going to be? Knowledge is one which a lot of organizations, frankly, over-pivot on, and they provide a lot of training. And sometimes maybe the desire is actually more important in some cases. Ability is making sure that the employees actually know how to use the tools when they get them, and then reinforcing, right? So it's not just one email that you send to everybody. You're actually going to have to go and reinforce this over time. And to your point earlier, Ankita, about healthy usage is you can always go further and further with the platform. And so that reinforcement piece is really going to help that. And so, when you have this role for change management, making sure there's a framework in place and that person, is leveraging all the resources that we provide from Microsoft to make sure you're hitting, something in each of those buckets of the ADCAR model. We talked about this one as well as making sure the experience is as frictionless as possible. So we went through those IT capabilities already. Super important that you've really taken some of the pain away from the users so they can onboard quickly and effortlessly. Now moving to probably one of the most important items, I probably should have mentioned this right at the start, but sponsorship. So IT organizations are really good at sort of just deploying tools, where when we're moving to this adoption world, where in some cases you actually need sponsorship from the business, from business stakeholders to get your change successfully adopted. So make sure that you've reached out to business leaders, VPs, even the CEO in some cases. Like there's nothing more powerful than having the CEO in his all-hands meeting say, oh, by the way, as a company, we're moving to OneDrive. It's really important for XYZ reasons. Please pay attention to the emails that are coming from IT in the next couple of weeks. So if you can get that sponsorship, then you lend credibility to the change that you're making, and you really help all your employees understand they do need to pay attention to this change, and it is important. And the next one I would say is the Champions Program. We didn't touch on this too much yet, but within every organization, there are passionate users, right? And it's really going to help you scale your adoption efforts if you can go and find those passionate users from within the organization and build a community around them. And then that's going to help you scale your message, right? It's very, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that users are much more likely to copy their peers and learn from their peers than they are any other method, okay? So they're likely to tap their friend on their shoulder, or they're going to go to their local guy in the cubicle next to him, and they know that guy's really into IT and loves all the Microsoft technology. So you want to try to make those people your champions and build a conduit so they have the latest information, that they know how you want things to do. It's going to help you sort of scale the work that you're trying to do throughout the business, because as an IT group, you're not going to be able to scale to touch every user, obviously. And so you can really amplify your impact by getting that champions group going.
It's funny, Allan. I mean, that resonates with me so deeply. I think of every time I've ever seen an amazing spreadsheet or a PowerPoint where I'm like, I need that template to work from. And of course, the same is true for seeing someone who is mastering how to put their files in the cloud or share and collaborate with others or get more done because they're able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think the final one I would mention, and we talked about as well, is KPIs. I've seen a lot of organizations take their KPIs and make them transparent. So they might spend a little time building a Power BI dashboard that actually talks about their adoption. They slice and dice it by business unit, and then they go and give that information to those business leaders. And I'll tell you, there's nothing more sort of impactful than having two business leaders compare themselves side by side. So a little bit of friendly competition. We can actually say, oh, business group over here, you're doing great. Your OneDrive adoption's at 90%. Fantastic. Business group over here, you guys are at 30%. You have some work to do, right? So it could have built up some healthy competition within the organization. But if you can make those KPIs transparent, and give the business visibility on how they're doing, then that can be really impactful.
I love that. And I love the notion of, there's awareness and breadth across that just helps people kind of go, well, what is a baseline? What is good? And you can say, oh, the team over there seems to be kicking it. They're doing great.
That's right.
What are we doing?
To the Champions program, I was just reminded, we did the case study with Chevron a year back, and I got the opportunity to interview some amazing folks at Chevron who led the implementation, the adoption, and were also end users. And one of the person that I interviewed, unbelievably, his title or his designation was productivity champion. And that was his job. Chevron is spread around 162 countries with like 52,000, 60,000 employees. And his job was to make sure that end users were successful on OneDrive and any collaboration tool. But yeah, I was amazed. And he used to travel around. He used to have seminars and workshops in which he used to run through the features and the advantages of OneDrive. And I mean, I would recommend our listeners to go to customers.microsoft.com and check out the case study on Chevron. It's amazing, specifically from the way they implemented and led the user adoption within Chevron.
That's fantastic. And that role is starting to crop up more and more. I see in a lot of organizations will have either they call it internal customer success, or I have some organizations call the role collaboration experts. There's a few different versions of it, but basically it's a wing of IT that their job is to go engage with the business and make the business successful. And again, it's coming back to this new muscle that we're building, right? Where IT doesn't have to spend all their cycles maintaining file servers anymore because, Microsoft's doing that for you. So that's freed you up to go and deliver more value back to the business. And there's a role there for someone to go and do that.
So, Allan, in the folks that you've been working with in that and the things that you've personally driven, what are some of the big things that have popped for you in your experience, kind of creating excitement and driving awareness, like maybe some of the stuff that isn't so obvious but really lands with people? Do you have any examples?
Yeah, so if we go back to the ADKAR model that I mentioned early on, the first pillar of that is awareness. And so how do you generate awareness? And once people have awareness, how do you create the desire where they're actually going to go and pay attention to the emails that you're sending and the things you're asking them to do? And so, we often use what we call Excite Days quite a lot, which can, take many forms, but often we'll set up in a cafeteria, for example, like a high traffic area inside the organization. We'll have a booth, we'll have balloons, we'll have OneDrive cupcakes, we'll have some swag. And, normally it's not for a deep training session or conversation. It's for people to notice and see that there's something happening. So we're constantly trying to reinforce this idea that, there was an email I got, but maybe I should go pay attention. We're normally talking about the key value propositions there. The other times, things we do either during the Excite Days, but these things can also take place over a period of months, which is gamification. And so have first person to put 10 files in OneDrive gets, XYZ recognition. So these types, making it fun. I have one customer that actually runs what they call immersion challenges, where they set up a scenario and they put it out there, and then users have to work through the scenario, which
cool.
might be upload a file, share a file, co-author a file. That's the scenario. When they complete it, they post back they completed the scenario, and then they get entered into a draw for a prize. So these types of learning initiatives can be really good incentives for people to actually sit up and pay attention. Related to that is getting users to share their stories. Okay, so again, users really learn from their peers. They really pay attention to what their peers, and people want to be like other people, frankly, right? So if you have a great success story in the business, get that person on video, right? Put it on your site, announce it, get some great recognition for that person or that team, and also get people to see, oh, wait, I could be like that. I want to be like that. I'm going to copy what they did. They've got a great idea. Super, super impactful. And then the final thing is getting the leaders engaged, right? So I talked about sponsorship, and it's great to have sponsors, but that's just not a name, right? You actually have to ask your sponsor to do things, right? So that sponsor should be talking in their all hands to the all company, or should be doing social posts on Yammer or whatever, social tool you're using in the organization to actually reinforce this message all the time.
I think that's a great point. And, that support that comes from that leader is all about how present it can be, right? If no one's seeing it and they're not hearing about it, it's a lot harder to get the value out of that leader being engaged and really driving it.
That's absolutely right. When you engage a leader to be a sponsor, you have to tell them what they're expected to do as part of it, right? And that would be, we'll ghostwrite an email, we want you to send it, we want you to mention it here. There are asks of them as part of being a sponsor.
I think this is a great place to segue into my next question. And this is a question that was asked to me by one of our customers at Ignite. And we try to do this in our podcast. We take questions from folks in social or people who we meet. So one of the customers that I met asked me that it's a little difficult for them to drive consumption for non-IT folks. And I think getting leaders engaged, Allan, to your point, would be probably one of the good ways to get non-IT folks involved in the implementation of a product. What would you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it really comes down to desires. Have you been effective in generating the desire outside of the IT organization? And so that might be, have you made the product relevant for these users? Right? Are you really appealing to them and their work style? I often think about it as the carrot and the stick, right? So the carrot is, here's all the great things you can do with OneDrive when you get it, and it's going to modernize the way you work. It's fantastic. And the stick is, here's your leader sending an email telling everyone, hey, you really need to pay attention to this. It's important for our organization. And you may need to use both depending on the culture of the company, but the sponsorship and the leadership there is really, really important. The other thing is, as I mentioned, making it really relevant for those users. So if you have employees in the field, for example, then you would probably want to talk about the remote work or work from anywhere capabilities of the product. Right? If you have a sales team, you might want to talk to them about how they can reduce their sale close time, right, by co-authoring files rather emailing files around. So looking at the actual customer that you're serving and what their scenario is, and actually you don't even talk about the product and the product capabilities, but talk about what they want to do and what their output is as a business unit, right? They don't necessarily care about OneDrive or this or that. What they care about is getting their job done more efficiently, getting it done quickly, getting home to see their family in the evenings on time. And so if you can find these threads and appeal to those things, you're going to make the product really, really relevant for those users. And I would highly recommend go out and speak to them. We often do what we call sort of an adoption workshop, where we'll sit down with a group of stakeholders from the business and say, okay, hey, so what do you do? What does your day look like? Right? And tell us about, and you'll find when you do that, all these like incredibly sort of archaic processes that people are following that you can modernize. And once you know what those common scenarios are, you can appeal to those directly in your messaging, communications, and training.
I mean, it's interesting. So much of what we've talked about today is really about the fundamentals of being human, right? The challenges we have, the things we desire and want to get done, and where OneDrive can fit in to help, and how we can help people realize and see that value while still really recognizing at the end of the day it's about people and meeting those people where they are and with what they need. I love that as kind of a pitch and focus for it.
I would also like to tie back to the point that Matt made earlier about all the resources that we have already available. So everything that we are discussing right now, be it driving awareness through excitement days or getting users involved or creating sponsors or a champions program, we have a lot of material that is available for you to access and to utilize. To do all of this, you don't need to start from scratch. So please visit aka.ms/OneDrive adoption.
So what Ankita's talking about is how you get to show up with a ready-made set of tools and materials to roll all of that out to make your job that much easier as you kind of implement some of the best practices you've heard today.
Correct.
All right. So just to close out this section a little bit, Allan, I was wondering kind of, for you and your experience, what are the top 2 to 3 most important features in driving adoption? What pops when you talk to people?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is working from anywhere. There's so many people out there that are still storing their files on their local My Documents folder, and that goes only as far as wherever that device goes. They can't switch to their mobile, they can't switch to a new device, they can't work from their home computer if they want to. So these are the capabilities that get unlocked, and no one's going to say no to that. It's a clear winner across the board. Is ability to work from anywhere and on any device. The second one is, sharing versus emailing. This one's a little bit harder to actually land for people, but once they get it, they really get it. And that's the onboard into everything else, all the other goodness that you get with Office 365 around co-authoring and collaboration and things like that. You've got to get into this mode of sharing. And people can recognize very easily that all the issues with emailing files around and the version issues and the forking of emails and things like that.
Oh, yeah, nightmare.
Yep, sharing will be my second. And the third one will be discoverability, is the ability to unlock organizational knowledge through files that you have access to be able to go back to find files that you last accessed recently and to see what's trending around you is a huge, huge benefit for organizations.
So before we close out, in your experiences, Allan and Matt, what has surprised you the most while getting users to OneDrive? Is there any interesting nugget that you would like to share?
Yeah, so this is Matt, and for me, one of the biggest surprises is really the effectiveness of some of those guerrilla tactics that Allan was sharing earlier on, doing the launch events, doing contests, giveaways, putting up signs all over the office. I'm a pretty analytical person to begin with, so I probably would discount the effectiveness of those sort of tactics, but they really do work. Be creative and do what fits for your organization. And I think doing things like this, having that on-site presence, is how you cast a wide net to be able to find champions and nurture those champions who can help you extend your reach, because you're only a few people likely that are working on this adoption. And so if you can find those engaged employees who might approach you at the launch event or really participate in the contest, and see if you can get them to be your champion and spread the word to their peers and colleagues.
Awesome. Allan, how about you?
Yeah, for me, I think what's really surprising is once you get this program underway, the hardest part is setting up the program and getting it launched. And once it's launched and as a flywheel, it starts to sort of move, how quickly adoption can really take off is amazing. Once you get to 20 or 30% of your organization, then you can really see things skyrocket. And if you're using some of the KPIs that we talked about, where you're not only measuring the number of users that are doing it, but how many times they're doing it, like how many files they're using, how many files they're sharing. You see engagement go up and up and up and up and up. It's really incredible to see. And then what happens then is you have the knock-on effect of other aspects of the service being adopted that organizations moved into. It's always really exciting. And in fact, the entire reason that I work in customer success is, I might go to an organization, I might get them up and running, give them the basics, and I'll come back 2 months later and I'll speak to the team, and they've, totally transformed their business process around, OneDrive and the work they're doing there. So it's really awesome to see how users can, once they've got the basics, they can really take it and run with it and do some really, really creative things.
I love that. And it makes me think, I think Ankita and I need to go on the road and maybe come visit some customers with you, because I love nothing more than seeing how people have taken these things and really incorporated it and made it their own in their organizations. Well, thanks, Allan, Matt. It's been so wonderful to have you on the show today. Loved the discussion and kind of learning about how we think through all the different components and pieces of driving success with adoption of OneDrive. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Next up, roadmap updates and important upcoming events, so don't go away.
This past month, we rolled out some very cool features, Save for Later, for example, which will allow you to bookmark files and folders from your OneDrive, files shared to you and those in shared libraries, to a saved for later list that you'll be able to easily access later. OneDrive users can now request files from others by sending an upload-only link with the new request file feature. To know more about it, listen to our previous podcast where we had Lauren Koo, the PM of this feature, and we discussed at length what all went into building this amazing feature. Lastly, we will now localize emails where possible to the preferred language of recipients as defined in their Azure Active Directory and Exchange settings. For more information on all these functionalities, do check out our blog at aka.ms/OneDrive/blog.
And now, upcoming events for everyone. We've got Ignite the Tour coming up. If you are unable to attend Ignite in Orlando, now is your chance to take advantage of all the benefits of Ignite brought to a city near you. We're bringing all of the same technical training led by Microsoft experts and your personal tech community. Between December and January, we're covering Tokyo, Beijing, Sao Paulo, Toronto, Shenzhen, London, Seoul, Osaka, Milan, and Johannesburg. To find the city nearest you, check out the link in our show notes, and you can follow hashtag MSIgniteTheTour.
Last month, we talked about the importance of mental health in workplace and recognized the importance of mental health awareness in all our lives. Jason, what do we have this month?
Well, this month I thought we'd do a little bit of a different thing, but still kind of go to the core kind of values that we talk about so much in our own team. I'll start by reading out kind of what we wrote down as a team about optimism. We believe optimism is a force multiplier. We generate energy, reduce cynicism, and are curious about the reasons behind our successes. And that's a really important kind of phrase to encapsulate the value of optimism. It's an opportunity for us to think broadly and engage in things that may seem daunting or challenging, and really to kind of confront the things in front of us with hope and excitement for the future. I think that really kind of forms the basis of how people and teams work and interact together when they can have that optimism built in.
That's a great point, Jason. And like the famous saying goes, success is the ability to move from one failure to another without loss of enthusiasm. So I think the enthusiasm or optimism in workplace should also be for failures. And having a culture in your workplace that allows you to fail fast and learn fast really helps employees to evolve and achieve more and take on stuff that might generally scare you.
That's right. And in fact, this fits into the overall conversation we've had a couple of times around psychological safety and how that fits into people being able to bring their best selves and their best work to it. And I think optimism is a core value for being able to enable that.
So, Jason, can you share any examples of how you've implemented this optimism in your day-to-day life in the workplace with your team members?
Oh, absolutely. And I think everyone can relate to this. We've all gotten the email that maybe made us feel a little cynical about the world and all the challenges that we might have. Or maybe we wanted to be snarky in a reply on those things. And what I found is that when I can take those moments and opportunities and be optimistic about what the results can be, one, it makes me a better person interacting. I talk in a way that is about what we can achieve and do and what's an outcome we can have, as opposed to kind of creating some self-pity and maybe lashing out a bit and pointing out problems or flaws or other things. And if I think recently about that, I've came into some new responsibilities in my role, and that really was a thing where being able to look at it as an exciting opportunity and be able to see how the future can change and we can have an impact in molding it really helped change the tenor of that conversation and has turned something into a big opportunity that I'm really excited about. And so I think it's all about how you view that and the lens you create on that world, and it's going to affect how you relate and connect to other people.
That is a great point, Jason. And I think something that really speaks to me and something I try to implement in my personal life as well is when you try to give the other person the benefit of doubt that he or she, whatever they are saying, may have a reason. And instead of being cynical about that or having self-pity about yourself, as you right now said, try to look at the bigger picture and try to look at ways to achieve the end result. Because most of the time, all of us are actually trying to achieve that one end goal. So, yep, that makes a lot of sense. And thank you for sharing such great ideas. Thank you to our guests, Allan Bourne and Matt Wolodarsky. To learn more about OneDrive and the latest developments, please follow our tech community blog at aka.ms/OneDrive/blog.
Please do reach out to us with questions and feedback. You can reach us via Twitter at OneDrive, at Jasmo, and at Ankita_Kirti21. And definitely visit our show page for links, resources, and more at aka.ms/SYNCUP. That's Sync Up. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts and tell your friends, colleagues. And if you've enjoyed Sync Up, write a review. It really does help new listeners learn about and find the show. We all know how important and impactful sharing can be.
Thank you for listening to Sync Up, a show about OneDrive, the Intelligent Files app for Microsoft 365. We are your hosts, Ankita Kirti and Jason Moore. We'll catch up with you next month.